And we are back with Making Connections. This is, of course, our weekly interview corner. And we're very pleased today to be joined by Kim Kyungmoon, well known as Korea's first master sommelier. And this is a very prestigious title held by less than 250 people around the world. While his passion for wine led him to work in the fine dining scene in New York, his recent interest in Korean sul is bringing him back to the motherland. So he joins us this morning to tell us about his mission to tell the story behind Korea's traditional spirits and also introduce it to an overseas audience. Good morning and welcome to Life Abroad.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's absolute pleasure to have you on the show as well, especially because I know that you're not based here in Korea. You're in New York, actually, but you came to Korea because of a project. So let's start off with that. Could you tell us a little bit about what that project is?
Yes. Right now I'm importing Korean sul to U.S. market. The reason that I came here this time is the CNN was filming about Korean food and culture all around the travel, and they invited me to tell the story about Korean sul.
That must be very exciting.
Yeah,
It must be your first time to come back in a couple of years too, right? Because of the
yes.
pandemic.
Yeah,
Things
exactly.
change so quickly here in Korea. Did you notice some of the changes?
I mean, little bit
Yeah.
here and there. I mean, it's unfortunately with the current situation, a lot
Right.
of restaurants are suffering,
Suffering,
and I mean, we're trying to support as much as possible, and
Right.
also in the sul industry as well.
Yeah.
But it's really exciting. A lot of Koreans do homsul and a honsul, and I think the Korean sul movement is very exciting right now.
Very exciting, especially with all that interest around K-culture and just Korea in general. So we'll get to that in just a bit. But first, because you're the first master sommelier from Korea, we want to talk a little bit about that as well. Now, master sommelier, only one of 250 maybe or so in the world. For those of us who are not actually very familiar with that, I mean, we know sommelier, but what exactly is a master sommelier and why is it so hard to become one?
So master sommelier is diploma that you have to go through a many series of rigorous exam that is held by the Court of Master Sommeliers that is based in U.S. and also there is American chapter. And for me, it took me about 10 years to complete the whole
Okay.
program.
Wow.
And you have to display the high example of sommelier as the beverage professionals, and it involves around not only wine but all different spirits and cocktails and beverage around the world. Yeah.
And also the service part as well, right? They also judge you on your service ability. So you said 10 years. It must take a lot of persistence, a lot of memorization, a lot of practice, maybe a lot of failed tests as well. But do you also have to be kind of born with an amazing sense of smell? Because I really do not have a very good sense of smell. I don't know why, but I still think I pride myself on having a good sense of taste. So I love eating, but when it comes to my sense of smell, very, very bad. So do you think you were born with this innate, great sensitive sense of smell that helped you to achieve this prestigious title?
Like Albert Einstein said, it's a genius is a 1% talent and
Right.
99% hard work. But within that 99% of hard work,
Yes.
you have to love what you do. And that love part really gets you excited and get you to study more and taste more. And even though, I wouldn't say I was born with it, but I think I trained harder and with training at the Culinary Institute as a cooking student.
Right.
And I was exposed to many different ingredients and different herb, fruits, and different flavors that I developed through that period. I think that helped me a lot.
Exactly. I read that you started off, you went to CIA to learn how to cook, and then you kind of pivoted and you decided to go to the wine area instead. Why? Was it just more interesting for you?
I was blown away by the whole experience at CIA, and even though I wanted to study abroad and study English, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, and all of a sudden I was in a cooking school, and it was the first time that I realized that learning is fun and learning is like exciting.
Right.
And when I was exposed to both food and wine and combination and what it creates altogether, it was fascinating. And I wanted to explore more into wine after graduating school.
So wine pulled you away from food. Of course, it's still very intrinsically linked, and you still
Very
have to do
much.
the same. Kind of a fun or maybe a nonsense question. There's so many different wines out there, but if there is one varietal that could be describing you, not your favorite, or it could be your favorite, I guess, but if you could describe yourself as a wine varietal, what would you say?
That's a great question. We love to talk about the grape variety and compare with the human because, I mean, there is so much similar link in between. Even though I love Pinot Noir, I don't think I can be one. But
Oh, why is that? Because I love Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir is a very finicky, very sensitive grape. And once when it's made into a wine, I mean, there's nothing else that's better. But for me, I think I'll compare myself to a Malbec. I mean, Malbec is originally grounded from Bordeaux in France. However, it flourished in Argentina. So it's sort of, I mean, I'm Korean born, grew up in Korea. However, my career really flourished in US and outside Korea.
Interesting.
And yeah, I think Malbec would be a great variety that would describe me.
I thought it might have something to do with Barolo because I love your t-shirt. You have a t-shirt that says Barolo King as well. That's a great t-shirt. And that must be your Master Sommelier badge.
That's
Do you
correct.
always have it on?
I mean, when I'm at
Talking
work.
about yes, very good. All right. Let me just ask you about the changing scene. I mean, we talked about a little bit about how the Korean, I think, wine scene and the dining scene, especially the fine dining scene, has so quickly evolved, I think. You know, we're coming up with really world-class restaurants these days, and more seem to be popping up. But New York has always been kind of like the center of fine dining. And you went there with Chef Im Jung-sik, of course, well known for Cheongsikdang, and you also helped open it there, earning Michelin 2 stars. And when you first went and helped open the restaurant and saw the reaction to people, maybe lots of non-Koreans kind of taking this fine dining Korean experience, and then you are pairing it with the wines that you have studied, what was that like? What was that experience like?
It was quite amazing to see how diverse the wine scene is in New York compared to Korea. So it felt like I was a kid in a candy store because I couldn't decide what to pair.
This was back in what,
2011.
11, okay, 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And Chef Im Jung-sik was pretty much the only one who was practicing more fine dining Korean cuisine, which wasn't took off immediately because, I mean, people weren't so familiar with the Korean food at that time. And the Koreatown was mostly dominated with the exchange students or
barbecue restaurants.
Yeah, barbecue restaurant. And there are a lot of guests walked out because we didn't have Korean barbecue at our place. So their expectation was so different. However, once they dine in, their eyes were wide open and they're ready to accept more about Korean food. And I mean, often Korean food has a notion of it's too spicy, too pungent. There are a lot of spices.
Right.
And Chef Jung-sik did a brilliant job of toning it down, but making more elegant. And that can work very well with wine.
Wine. So you paired the wines that would kind of bring out the flavor. Now, I don't know if it's maybe that you saw the limitations of bringing out the best of Korean food with wine, but what made you pivot from your first love, it seems, which is wine, to traditional Korean food? Because I remember reading an article in which you said when you first made Master Sommelier, you said your dream actually was to create your own wine. But has that dream changed now? What made you kind of betray wine? I don't know if it's betray is too strong a word, but pivot from wine to sur.
I mean, I'm not totally walked away from wine. I still teach at a culinary school in Manhattan about wine program and sommelier training. And I do a restaurant consulting for their beverage program and staff training and all of that. But the sur came about when I was in New York working with Chef Jung-sik. And I mean, at that time, I was so passionate about wine and I was all in with like cool wine pairings. However, when the guests came in, their expectation is if they're having Korean food, they should have
Korean liquor or
liquor or Korean
wine.
beverage. And because I knew what was available, I mean, all the big brand grain bottle soju's and
Which are
nothing else.
good in their own right.
Yes, absolutely. But it wasn't something that was we are proud enough to serve with a higher level Korean food. So at the time, I was sort of shocked that like Westerners are looking for Korean
I
beverages.
see.
So I was trying to search for artisanal product, but it wasn't like it was almost impossible because I mean we're just a one small restaurant many thousand miles away
Right.
from Korea.
You were trying to look for artisanal soju or
Yes.
in the U.S.
Yes, we're
Okay.
trying to import, but no one was very interested
Okay.
at that time.
I
So
see.
it was very challenging. So I mean, it was in the back of my head, but after I passed my master's sommelier exam, and I was looking for what's new, what's next step for me. And yes, I still have my heart in winemaking.
But you've already touched the peak, right? You've already been there, I guess.
However, also, I mean, since I was in the restaurant business for so long, and I was thinking about opening a restaurant and looked around, and there are so many exciting Korean restaurants opened by young, exciting chefs
Right.
in New York. And it felt like, I mean, if I open a restaurant, it will be another Korean restaurant. And when I talked to them, they all had the same need that I had 10 years ago. And they were looking for those artisanal Korean sul. So the light came up in my head and, oh, maybe I should just take on that mission and bring Korean sul to U.S. market. Yeah, that's all started.
So I guess you would have to then come to Korea and you start meeting the distilleries, visiting them. How has that been going so far then?
Yes, I quickly realized the reason I wasn't able to get artisanal product in New York was all the breweries and distillery were so small. It's all family-run businesses, and they don't have enough laborers to cover, like, barely for their production. I mean, they couldn't even think about local distribution or even exporting. So when I visited, I toured around for a few weeks and visited many breweries and distilleries, and everyone was excited to hear they could put their product out to the world. So they're very like helpful, and they're working with me, and yeah, it was fantastic.
I mean, as given your training as a master sommelier, when you come across traditional sul, does that training help you to also, I don't know, maybe rate the quality of traditional sul, or do you need like a different maybe set of skills to rate traditional sul as well? Were you happy with the quality of the sul that you found? I mean, granted they are small and family run, but that doesn't always mean that they are of high quality as well. So, I mean, bringing that all together, were you thinking, okay, this is good enough that we can introduce to the fine dining scene in the U.S.?
Yes, I mean, it's hard to directly link the flavor of a Korean sul to wine. However, a lot of beverage industry benchmark around the wine tasting, how
Right.
they assess the color, aroma, and flavor, and talking about all the descriptors often used in wine and applied to sake
Key
or
flavors.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
do say that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the sake, coffee, and even Korean sul can be applied, but we can use some different descriptors, but still something that you can relate to wine drinkers or other beverage lovers as well.
What do you think needs to be done to better sort of grow the traditional sul industry? Because it seems like it's what you say, there's a growing appetite for it. There's a need to grow the industry as well. Do we need maybe like the equivalent of a sommelier sort of system for traditional sul as well? So does it need better marketing? What do you think needs to be done to develop our traditional sul market?
Yes, I think we're still taking a baby step, but I think it's a very healthy movement around Korean sul right now, and especially this industry is run by more of a younger generations and who didn't have the full understanding of Korean history. However, they're longing to learn more, and since they're a lot younger and there is a opportunity for longevity for the exciting Korean 술 movement. And yeah, I think there's not enough Korean 술 professionals. And I mean, even Koreans don't know about artisanal Korean 술. And everyone's so familiar with the green bottle soju and
Right.
somek and all that. However, there's a beautiful array and diverse style of Korean 술 that we need to discover. And by reaching out to the world, and that help us to showcase what we have in terms of quality. And because in US there are like all different sorts of alcoholic beverages around the world coming to the States, and it's not about fighting against the big brands and the marketing budgets. And I mean, all in all, it comes down to the quality. And I mean, I believe that Korean 술 has a quality that can be comparable to like fine wine and or spirits around the world.
Kind of reminds me of sort of the revival of makgeolli, right? Because it's been around, but it was always kind of regarded maybe as an older person's drink. And then it got popular overseas and Japan in particular. And so that kind of revived the trend. And now we're seeing exciting things being done to makgeolli here in Korea as well. There's a greater interest in learning about it and also consuming it. So maybe you might, would you be considering maybe taking up or introducing a course to teach traditional 술, maybe to Korea as well? Because it seems like you can be responsible for bringing up a boom in traditional 술 overseas, and maybe that can translate back to here as well.
Yes, there's a lot of works to be done in the States because it's quite new, and especially fermentation is such a fascinating topic in U.S. right now, which is quite common for Koreans. I mean, every meal we have some sort of fermented dishes, and this natural fermentation of Korean food is something really interesting for the U.S. market, and I really look forward to talk to them about Korean traditional 술 because there's nothing else like it.
Right. Well, I mean, not to just, I don't know if it's quite fair to compare traditional food and wine, I mean, because they are completely different things. But when someone like a master sommelier, like yourself, has such high praise for traditional food and sees the potential of it, making it big on the international market, I think that serves as a lesson for us to take a greater interest and also maybe further develop the market ourselves. So I want to thank you, Kim Kyungmoon Kim, for coming in today and for sharing your personal story and also your love of wine and traditional food. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully you'll come back with, and I'll share some more stories.
I'll love to.
In a future edition as well.